Hannah. Hannah, welcome to the Australian Learning Community Network. Hannah was born in the Philippines and immigrated to New Zealand with her family in the late 1980s, so she's been there a very long time. Since earning a BA in English and Politics and an MA in Politics from the University of Auckland, her career path has seen her take on a variety of leadership roles in the health and education sectors in both New Zealand and Australia. And she's worked in Australia. She earned her MBA at the University of Newcastle in various volunteer roles with a number of LGBTIQA plus organisations. And she has a wealth of adult education sector experience and including leadership roles. You can read her extensive CV, and I think the adult community education sector of Aotearoa has been very lucky in gaining Hannah as a CEO, and she's gained recognition for her exceptional skills in transforming and modernising organisations, spearheading strategic change, successfully collaborating with government agencies and funders, and growing workplace cultures. And it's with great excitement that she returns to New Zealand in Aotearoa. So we're excited to have you here as well, Hannah. So over to you.
Thank you, Leonie. Can everyone hear me okay? Tēnā koutou katoa, kumusta, and hello. And tēnā koutou katoa is hello in Te Reo Māori. And of course, kumusta is from my own language, Filipino, which Robbie would know really well. And Robbie and I have been connected since 2009, 2008, so we go a long way back. And Leonie and I have recently been connected again through Robbie as well, who thought you've got to connect with Leonie, and the opportunity came up when one of our groups in Ashburton in the South Island expressed interest in wanting to become a learning city. And we were struggling to find some information. We easy enough to find information, but we didn't know who to talk to. I think the UNESCO team was quite busy. So eventually we got to Leonie. And so when was it Diana who acknowledged Leonie and thanked her for her service to ALCN. I also need to extend a big thank you from Aotearoa, New Zealand to Leonie, because in her volunteer capacity, she was also working with us to help our couple of organization understand what it's like to be a learning city. So appreciate the network and the strong network between New Zealand and Australia, and long may it continue. Really keen to continue to collaborate with our friends across the ditch. And as Leonie said, I have worked in Sydney for about 15 years, so I've only recently come home. So I still have such a close affinity to New South Wales, and of course I've traveled around Australia as well. Thank you for having me today. Leonie invited me to come and speak and just give you a bit of an overview about the ACE landscape in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And what I've got for you is just some slides to take you through some of this information. And apologies if you know this already about New Zealand, and if you don't, hopefully you'll find this interesting, and we can have some I'm happy to answer some questions at the end. Sharon, should I just share my screen?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. If you have any issues, I'll share, but if you'd like to try.
Okay. Can you see this okay?
We can, if you just want to put it in the presentation mode.
Presentation mode. Give me a sec. My laptop has just taken over the screen. Problem with having two screens is yep. In this presentation mode now. Excellent. I think we've got that. Excellent. Can you see that okay?
Can. I can see it in presenter view
screen.
though.
Oh, you can see presenter view too. So let's stop that.
View, so might just need to swap the screens.
Yeah, give me a sec. Apologies for this. I was having some technical issues with.
That's okay. Yep, looks good, Hannah.
Is that good now? Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Excellent. So adult community education, Aotearoa. What is adult community education, or ACE in New Zealand? We're a diverse group of people and providers in New Zealand, and we offer non-formal and community-based learning opportunities for adults. We focus on lifelong learning, personal development, social inclusion, and community engagement. A lot of our programs help people build confidence, develop skills, and engage more fully in society. And we've evolved over the years, and we've got quite as any ACE, I guess, group in any country, or particular between the two countries. We've had quite an interesting history, depending on the political environment at the time and depending on the funding available. When I was involved in ACE back in 2010, when I returned to New Zealand briefly, we experienced a significant funding cut, actually 2009. And that's when the night classes were decimated. And the challenge then was the focus on Moroccan cooking and toilet golf became the biggest issue, when in fact they weren't the majority of the courses that are being offered. But at the time, the focus was on that, and it made it look like ACE wasn't relevant and ACE was only for hobbyists. And that's a major challenge that ACE Aotearoa had to advocate for. And it was quite a challenging time for us. And what's happened then is, now I think the group that is running the schools program are now, I think they've got about 12 members from 200 plus back when it was strong. So there's been some challenges over the years. Just a quick history there. I'll send you a copy of my presentation, so I won't go through this in detail. And of course, the last 5 years have been reasonably challenging, particularly around COVID. But also back in 2022, we've had a significant weather event in New Zealand. So a big part of New Zealand was flooded, which meant that particularly around the Taranaki region and in the Hawke's Bay, there was some significant flooding happening there. So a lot of our ACE providers weren't able to operate as per usual. And more recently, we drove around, we went to visit the area, and it was really devastating to see what the impact was of the flooding in that region. And then you start to think, well, what was the impact for ACE providers in the area as well? And that was pretty significant. What makes us unique? We're learner-centered, we're community-based, we're flexible and responsive. And often programs that are funded are offered for free or at a low cost, except for programs that are clearly targeting probably more professionals, and then they're able to charge a bit more for some of those programs. Who delivers ACE? Schools with ACE education programs, Wānanga and PTEs, community organizations and NGOs, libraries and local councils, iwi and marae-based education providers, and often they work in partnership with government agencies to deliver funded programs. So TEC is the main funder of ACE programs in New Zealand, and they support learning that is aligned with government priorities around literacy and numeracy, community resilience, Maori and Pacific success, and pathways to further learning or employment. And I've just reiterated there a bit more of who the priority learners are for ACE around the Tertiary Education Commission funding. Bit of at a glance, I don't know if you can see that. I just did a quick snapshot from our annual report last year, and this doesn't represent the full ACE. These are providers who responded to our request to provide their stats around their ACE program. So we collate that every year. And again, the numbers vary depending on the types of providers that respond. And sometimes we get big providers that are unable to respond because they've had significant staffing changes, and we know what that's like. Then they're not able to provide the data for us. So it is a bit challenging to try and collect this information. And I think I'd love to be in a position where we can definitively say these are the figures across New Zealand. But it gives us an indication of what's happening in the sector, and especially for those organizations that respond. A new question that I added last year when I joined the organization was the number of volunteers that work within the sector. Because in my visits to our members, they talked about the volunteers, and I thought, I actually wasn't really that aware that we have that many volunteers working in the sector. So we asked that question. And in this particular data collection, there were 1,300 volunteers, more than the number of tutors employed. I can't say that that is the definitive number, but it was just really interesting to capture that data and find out. So we're thinking about things like we need to partner with Volunteering New Zealand and try and support our providers and our leaders in the sector on volunteer engagement and volunteer management types of strategies. The picture here is his house in Wellington, based in Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. We are the national umbrella organization for adult and community education. We're also a membership organization. So our members are generally ACE providers and some individuals who are still really passionate about ACE, but may not be involved in ACE anymore, but wants to continue to be a part of the spirit of ACE. So what we do is we advocate for the sector. Our big contract with the Tertiary Education Commission is to build sector capability, and we've had that contract for many years now. And within that, what we offer are things like professional development grants. We host flagship events like Hui Fono for Pacific and Maori educators and leaders, and we also have a national conference every year. And if you still have time, you're welcome to register and join us in New Zealand. And I know that Leonie and Robbie will be joining us, so we're looking forward to having you there. We also deliver workshops and online and face-to-face to the sector, and they're well received across the board. We added the online function last year because it's really difficult to reach educators in regional areas, and accessibility is obviously a challenge, and that's proving to be a really an effective strategy around getting more educators attending our programs. So why does ACE matter for us? It increases social cohesion and community well-being, improves employment prospects, intergenerational learning is really big. And mental health and well-being is a big aspect of ACE delivery. And of course, we all know that digital inclusion is always going to be a challenge. The theme for our conference and Hui Fono this year is AI, and that is artificial intelligence and ancestral intelligence. So we're really looking forward to bringing AI to the sector. We're all grappling with it, and we're covering top themes like governance, ethics, implementation, and the use of the tools. So this will be the first large-scale offering to the sector around the topic of AI, and we're really looking forward to seeing how the sector responds and how that might inform future professional development opportunities for the sector as well. Looking ahead, it's probably not limited to New Zealand, and I think a lot of us can probably relate to this. Limited funding is always going to be a challenge. There's no extra funding available. In fact, we're hearing from the sector that funding coming from health and other agencies have dried up, and so some programs have had to stop. But at the moment, the TEC funding is still present and continually supporting our ACE programs. Data and impact measurement, I think that's always a challenge around how do we ensure that we've got good data and that we can, do some pretty good analysis on it and then report about it. And then hopefully, if we do it well enough, it should inform the strategy of the organization and the strategy of our approach to the sector. So that's definitely an area that we're going to spend quite a bit of resources on over the next couple of years. And access is always going to be a challenge, particularly when there are significant weather events and travel is dependent on the weather. It's easy enough for you to travel and think you're getting to one place, and then there's there's strong winds, and then you can't fly, or streets are flooded. So access is always going to be something that we are considering in the way that we're delivering our programs. There's some pretty good opportunities available to us, like cross-sector collaboration, embracing digital learning and AI. What does that mean for the ACE sector? And how do we target underrepresented learners in New Zealand? And how do we continue to strengthen Maori and Pacific-led education initiatives? And we've got some pretty good partners in the sector that are supporting our work in that space. It's a nice slogan, education for all, for life. We're really adding lifelong learning to our conversation is one of those things that we're really trying to bring back to the conversation. So we're talking about ACE, but we're also talking about lifelong learning, where we can map the journey of a New Zealander from, say 18 to 88 or beyond, and work out what does that actually look like, and what does ACE look like when we're supporting people from across a diverse sector in New Zealand. It's a space where education meets community development, and hopefully a strong ACE Aotearoa also contributes to a strong ACE sector. And one of our focus this year and over the next few years is transforming the organization so we can then help transform the sector. If you're interested in hearing one of the programs that was featured in the Hui, it's on YouTube. This is an interesting outcome of a well thought out comm strategy. We brought in a journalist as one of our comms team, and we decided that we really need to unpack or unearth the stories that we print in our printed newsletter. So we said, okay, what are the top 3 stories in February? Let's repurpose that as a social media card. We did that. One of the journalists picked it up within a week. Another journalist who is one of the, like senior journalists for the Hui, senior presenter, she picked it up, approached us. We connected them with the program, and it was, it was featured in this week's episode, I think. And it was really big for us to have that as a feature because we really want to get to that place where New Zealand is talking about ACE programs and that New Zealand is able to hear about the impact of ACE in around economic participation, social well-being, mental health, and social connection and mental health and well-being. And you can continue to talk about it till we're blue in the face by putting it on our website, but sometimes a different strategy is really where you need to get that awareness across the country. If you want to find out more about what we do, subscribe to our newsletter. That is available as a PDF as well. And we have a monthly e-news as well. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was amazing. And I'm really impressed with that last item you talked about, where you actually took information from your newsletter and got it into a YouTube video and got all that reach. So we can learn from that. So I'll certainly look at that video and see what any hints.
Actually, the YouTube video was a formal interview done by the TV show called The Hui, by a proper journalist. So they went across, I believe it's in Nelson, and they did and they were featured on national TV. And initially it was a program that we found out about. We interviewed them and we printed their story in a newsletter. And I think for me, it's always good when you're new coming in, isn't it? Because you're going, how do people know? What do people know about ACE? And when people ask me, hey, you're back in New Zealand, what are you doing? And I'm saying, well, I'm the new CE for ACE Aotearoa. And then it takes me sometimes 5 steps before I can explain to them who ACE is, before they can realize
we all understand that.
And I'm going,
when you talk about lifelong learning within local government too, it's the same thing.
And I didn't want to jump straight into night classes because it is a feature, but ACE is wider than that. And eventually they do get it. And can you imagine, for me, the opportunity to change that and to actually raise consciousness of New Zealanders about ACE can have some significant impact, so that we are sitting around the table with decision makers and policymakers and politicians that are developing some of these initiatives and programs and funding changes. So yeah, it's a big piece of work, but I think we've got to start somewhere. And often it started with a little social media card from an old story that we featured, and now it's on national TV. Long may that continue.
Does anyone else have any questions of Hannah? Sam.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was just really keen to hear a little bit more about your ancestral intelligence learning practices.
That's a really good question. Robbie will be pulling that topic together for us at the conference.
Okay.
Ancestral intelligence is really important for our Maori and Pacific educators, most specifically, because as you know, the challenge with AI these days is things are getting lost. And even the translation that are coming back around through the AI systems are often not as accurate as you would like. Even the language translation, where you can go, can you tell me what this means, how this is translated in the Cook Island language? And when you check that with your elders, actually, it's not quite where it needs to be. So there's a lot of issues around data sovereignty and understanding if we're still even grappling at a base level of how to even use the tools. And then what does it actually mean in terms of our own culture being swept up in all these technologies? There's a lot of conversation that will need to happen. So I'll be able to tell you a bit more after the Ho'oponopono in the conference. And we've asked, sorry, Robbie, to W in, but we've asked Robbie as an educator to actually hold a panel that will then pull together all, Robbie, I'm sure we had this conversation, right? That will pull together all those conversations across the board, AI and AI. And so what does that mean for us? So we're looking forward to having that. And beyond that, I guess what we're really hoping is this will start the conversation for our educators around AI and maybe produce some, hopefully maybe some white papers around what's happening in the space, because I think what we're really hoping for not to happen is that we hold a conference, it stays there, see you later, see you at the next conference next year. I think we've got a really good opportunity this year to pull that together and actually extend the Korero, Talanoa, Kwentuhan. I just used 3 different languages there. Korero in Tereo Mari, Talanoa in Samoan, and Kwentuhan in Tagalog. Let's continue the conversation. And so what does that mean? That's why people are coming. That's why we've invited several speakers that are quite well versed in the space of that of ancestral intelligence. It's a really big topic in New Zealand at the moment. In fact, when we started doing this topic, thinking about this topic, we were like, who are we going to get? And actually, we didn't realize that there's already so much conversation happening in the space, and there are a lot of people that have already done quite a lot of work in it. So we will be covering things like governance, ethics, implementation, and use of technologies as a starting point. And we've got speakers, both Pacific and Maori speakers, that will be driving some of those discussions. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Hannah? Diane.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much for your presentation, Hannah. I was interested I don't know a lot about the sort of different structures within New Zealand, but I was wondering about whether you might have a similar network to ours, well, maybe not necessarily a network, but wondering about what connections the ACE sector has with whether it's local governments or learning communities.
In Australia or in New Zealand?
In New Zealand. I guess just trying to
understand where it links.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think around connections, back probably in pre-2010 to 2009, there was quite a structured networks within ACE, and they were called ACE networks. It actually had a separate funding where different groups were funded to connect and engage with each other. And that was actually pre my time. By the time I joined ACE Aotearoa back in the days, those networks were starting to disappear. We've got a very strong network in Christchurch called ACE Networks, and these are partly because there's a lot of luminaries and ACE stalwarts that are based in Christchurch that have actually continued that network. So they choose to meet every month, which we join that meeting, and different providers will attend that. Partly also because one of our contractors and staff member is who works for another organization, also does some work in ACE. So she's able to use both roles to connect that. So we're just lucky in the sense that, she's got the initiative to do that and continue to do that and work with others. There is also a small group in Auckland that are meeting, that are ACE providers around schools, and they invited me last last month, and it's quite a strong network. They get together. I think it might be every quarter, and they talk about, they support each other, particularly around new staff that are, grappling with the change in systems that they have never been handed over to. So, but so those are, that's a slightly formal network because they're a group. There's also class. But there's some challenges there because they weren't able to re-register as part of the new Incorporated Societies Act, with changes to constitutions and changes to operational expectations. So there isn't really a formal network that ACE is leading. We've got a membership group. We bring people together for conferences, and in Hubifono, and also through our professional development workshops. It's interesting that you asked, Diane, because through my visits last year, I spent quite a bit of time meeting with the different members just to try and understand where the sector is at. There seems to be a real need to want to connect. Like, they go, how do we want to meet, we want to talk. So when I suggested, well, maybe we should have a breakfast meeting sometime, they're like, we would be there, we'd love that. So again, without the funding, we would love to drive it, but it will need to come from somewhere. And so you've got to fund some of those activities through travel, catering. And it's too late for this particular funding round, but some of the things that we're thinking about is, well, how do we factor that in a current funding agreement if the networks are requiring it? Or in another time and place, is there another opportunity to reestablish some additional funding to support those networks? And I think, and this could be controversial, so please don't quote me on it. Actually, you can quote me on it, but I'll say it. But I think it probably needs to be led by ACE Aotearoa to start with, to just kind of bring people together, because we have the contacts, we have the leadership role, lead that space. And then, you know how communities evolve, they eventually find their groove, and then sometimes they don't need that structure anymore, and they will go ahead and do their own thing. We're also engaged with other organizations like Aotearoa, who does I guess teaching excellence kind of support for academics, and they do a little bit of an ACE kind of program as well. So we network with some of their connections and through some of their events. So nothing formal except for the one in Christchurch. But there seems to be a lot of talk around wanting to establish something. In what form? Because obviously people are worried about reestablishing the older format back pre-2009. They're like, well, that didn't work anymore. But who knows? There's nothing new under heaven and earth. Pre-established networks might still evolve in the same way in 15, 17 years later. So that's a challenge for us at the moment to see what can we do to maybe lead that conversation. Yeah.
And we're also interested in linking with your learning cities as they establish.
Yeah.
And we've also had preliminary talks to Ashburton, so we'd like to see them develop. And I know that Kate White visited the city of Canning recently, so we've already made a connection there, and Sam was very good to host her and talk about the city of Canning as a UNESCO learning city. So it's through that organic conversation where things can start, and we hope that we can do more of that with you.
Robin is a great connector, because as soon as I started the role, he said, you've got to connect with Leonie. Great, and he was quite fast. And so, and I've connected with Jenny as well with ALA. In fact, I just had a meeting with her earlier today. And we've decided to give each other like a reciprocal membership so that we can continue to connect. We don't have to pay, just reciprocal. Let's because we really keen to connect with each other and learn from each other, and maybe do a joint webinar later on in the year. So we're also well connected with ASBE. The current president is a Samoan New Zealander. So he's a former executive member as well for the South Pacific region, Region 4. So we've got that strong connection with ASBE, and we've attended their events, and also obviously International Council for Adult Education. We're somewhat connected just through the work that they do. And I think maintaining those, and UNESCO, we've recently renamed our Festival of Adult Learning event. It used to be called Adult Learners Week, and then ACE Aotearoa made a decision, I think 7 years ago, to call it Festival of Adult Learning. And then we've just returned back to Adult Learners Week, because there's so much familiarity about being part of that UNESCO event. Why veer away from that? So when we've done that, the libraries have actually given us feedback that, oh, it's back. And I'm like, it never disappeared. It's always been around, but they didn't realize that actually it was still in existence because we changed the name. Yeah. So that's for
Okay.
us, it's a big win. Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at the time, and we're at the end of our program now, and I think we could talk some more, but we better let you go back to work, and we hope to carry on the conversation again some other time. And I'd really like to thank you, and I think on behalf of the ALCN, we thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and I will see you in a few weeks at the
Yes.
conference. So I'll look forward to talking further in person.
Thank you.
So I'm sure our other members would also like to thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. All the very best for the rest of the year.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank
Hannah.
you.
Thank you
Thanks, Hannah.
very much. Bye.
Bye.